My name is Lori Norris, and I have been in the resume business since 2004. I've been teaching resume writing to both high school students and adults since, let's see, 2002. And so I've been teaching this subject for a lot of years, and I take a little bit of a different approach. I am a certified professional resume writer and a certified job and career transition coach, and have owned a resume writing business here in Arizona for 20 years. So I'm happy to have you here. It looks like we have a lot of Arizonans in the Zoom with us today. Typically, we have people from all over the country, so it's good to see all us Arizonans and enjoying our good weather. Finally, we know now why we live in Arizona. So as I said, we are going to go through a couple of things today. We're going to start off by, I'm just going to clear up some resume myths, kind of change the way you think about the resume. And then we're going to go just section by section on your resume from the very top to the very bottom, and just really talk about some best practices. And I would love it if you would stay muted until the end. I promise I will leave time for questions when you can pipe in and answer, unmute and answer some questions or ask some questions, excuse me. But I've got the chat up. I can't promise I'm going to be able to address your questions as it's going through, but I will try to catch those. And yes, one of the reasons we want you to register using the link that you see on the screen is that we want to send you the recording so that you can continue to listen and enjoy if you missed anything. So the slides will be in that recording, and that's the best way for you to get access to those slides. Okay, so we're going to get started. As I said, we are here to talk resume best practices. I'm going to take you step by step through the process of writing that resume and really talk about how to create a resume that is going to get results for you. And you know what we really want is a resume that does its job. And at its core, the resume's one and only job is to get you an interview. Resumes don't get jobs. Nobody's going to look at your resume and say, okay, I'm hiring that person, most definitely. But what we want, we always say the resume is your ticket to the dance. Then you got to get there and dance your butt off. So again, we are going to talk a little bit about the resume first, and then we're going to just go step by step and rework it. So as I say, talk about it. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Excuse me. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is the importance of the resume. I said it already, right? A resume doesn't get you a job. A resume's purpose is to get you an interview. And so oftentimes when people say, I need to find a job, they think, oh, the first thing I need to do is write a resume. And while a resume is important, it is not the one and only thing you need to do in your job search. I believe that the first step in an effective job search is figuring out your focus. You've got to know where you're going next. You've got to know who you're trying to attract. It's very important that you know exactly the type of role you're targeting. And so here's the thing, resume writing, job searching in general is strategic marketing. That's all it is. It's a marketing process. And in strategic marketing, we have to know who is our customer. We have to know what does our customer want and what do we have that can meet our customers' needs. And so if I don't have any idea what kind of a job I'm looking for, what do I put on my resume? What do I highlight? Who do I connect with on LinkedIn? What interview answers do I start preparing? And so what I tell people is doing a job search without a focus, without knowing the kind of role you're looking for, it's sort of like going out into the ocean fishing with an empty hook. And you put that empty hook out there and you tool around in your boat, and you might accidentally hook a fish in the back as it swims by. But if you know exactly what you're trying to catch, you're going to be much more effective, right? Put the bait on the hook, have the right type tackle, go to the right part of the ocean. And so a lot of that is something I want you to think about. So not knowing what kind of job you're looking for is like fishing with an empty hook in the ocean. So I want you to be very intentional about your job search. You've got to know what it is that you are looking for. And so because this is a marketing process, we have to remember that your skills, your experience, your accomplishments, those are all about your product, which is you. And you've got to know who your customer is, and that's your future employer, right? So I like to tell people that if only good resumes got jobs, we would have like a 75% unemployment rate. There's, good resumes are not as common as you might think. So bad resumes get jobs. They do, because employers need to hire people. But I'm going to tell you right now that a targeted, focused resume that showcases your value, that highlights the accomplishments that you bring to an employer, is going to expedite your job search. And that is what we're going to talk about today, is creating that really targeted, focused resume that will make this process a quicker process for you. Okay. Nobody wants to be in a job hunt for an extended period. So we're going to try to expedite that as much as we can. Okay. So keep that in mind. All right. The next thing I want to talk to you about is, what should your resume have in it, right? You see this guy kind of writing think about the Walgreens receipts. They're so long, right? I don't know why they have to be that long, but our resume shouldn't be that long either. And so your resume doesn't need to contain everything you've ever done in your career. A resume is, excuse me, a generally accepted 10-year picture of your work experience. And so if you've got 25, 30 years of your career, you don't need to put it all on your resume, right? So you just need to give us the last 10, max 15-year picture of your work experience. One of the things, if you're going back to your entire career, you're inviting age discrimination. People shouldn't know your age just from reading your resume. And so really it is just a 10 to 15-year picture. If you're in a situation where something you did more than 15 years ago is important on your resume, there are ways to work that in, and we can talk about that if this is something that you're facing in your career right now. But it really doesn't need to be more than 15 years back in your history. Okay. And so think of this as it's a very targeted, right? Because your resume is not a storage area. It's not a comprehensive work history. As I said, it's a strategic marketing document. And if we think about marketing, some of the best marketing campaigns, if you think about Jeep, right? Jeep doesn't talk about their motors or the features of their car. They market adventure in the outdoors. They market freedom and exploration. If you think about Dove Beauty, they don't talk about the contents of their soap or their lotions. They talk about self-love and acceptance. Coca-Cola doesn't say drink my brown fizzy sugary drink. They talk about have a Coke and a smile. So it's about friendship and fun. And I want you to think about what you're marketing when you market yourself, right? You're not marketing the fact that you answer phones and write emails and you help customers, right? You market the value that you provide to the company. And so I really want you to start thinking about that. Like, what is it that you're bringing to the organization? And I want you to think about what makes you worth the salary they're going to pay you. How are you adding value to the company? What are the benefits that you bring to the organization? And that is what your resume is about, plain and simple. It's not a work history. It's not everything you've ever done in your career, okay? So start thinking about, what is your message that you want to say in your resume? Now, this one is an interesting one because quite honestly, the resume is not about you. Okay. And so if the resume isn't about you, then who is it, right? We're writing about your work experience and your accomplishments. But what I really want you to think about is you need to take the focus off of yourself and really make it about the employer. How can you add value to them? How can you benefit the organization? So an employer is looking for the most cost-effective employee. That means the person that is going to bring them the best return on their investment. So not the person they can hire for the lowest salary, but the person that is going to be the most valuable. So you've got to start thinking about what makes me cost effective? Why am I of value to an employer? Okay, so that's something I really want you to think about. So we will talk more about how we do that as we get into the session. Okay, when a company hires, they do it for one of two reasons: because they have a need to solve, a need to fulfill, or a problem to solve. That's it, just one of those two things. And so if you're doing a targeted search and writing a targeted resume, you're figuring out, what is that company's need? What are their problems? And how can I show them that I am the answer to that problem? And so I want to tell you right now that some people kind of wear it like a badge of honor. Like, I've applied to 400 jobs in the last 2 months. Like, to me, that just tells me you're hitting apply to everything and sending out a generic resume to the same resume to every company, because you can't do 400 targeted resumes in a couple of months. It's just not possible. So I want to challenge you to do it differently. I want to challenge you to job search in a very strategic, focused manner. Okay. I want you to really think about like researching the company. So you see a job that's open, and I want you to go out and look into that company and identify, do what we call a SWOT analysis. And SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Right? So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What do they do really well? What are their strengths? Where are they struggling right now? What are their weaknesses? What opportunities for growth or expansion do they have in their future, and their threats? Okay, so what threats are happening out there? Their competition, what's their competition doing? What's changing? Okay, so something to really think about. I want you to do that research and then think about, okay, now how can I add value to that company, knowing what I know about them? Okay, so I would like for you to really change the way you're job hunting. And there is no quick and easy answer. And so maybe this isn't for you, and that's okay. But there is not a quick and easy answer for job hunting. There's not a quick fix. There's not a website I can give you where you can go and immediately get it. This is work. Job hunting is effort. And, you know, but I want you to do it in an efficient manner. I want you to do it so that you're working with quality and not quantity. It's not just hitting a button. That's just not the market that we're in today. So we're going to have to work harder and smarter on each application. And I can tell you that if you send out 5 to 10 targeted resumes and cover letter packages every week, as opposed to sending out 100 of the same thing to all different kinds of companies, you're going to get better results. Okay. So again, something we're going to think about. All right. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is that generic resume. Okay, if you're writing a resume and you're trying to appeal to everyone, you're going to end up appealing to no one. Okay, that is something I really need you to think about. So if you're going to make them dig through your resume to find the good stuff, the relevant stuff, they're going to move on to the next candidate. Okay, and so I really want you to think about your resume being that targeted, focused resume. We need to one that's going to speak to that employer's needs. Okay. So if you're trying to come across as a jack of all trades, all right, if you are trying to say, I'm your Swiss Army knife, well, I have a question for you. If you had to drive a nail into wood today, and you went out to your toolbox and there was a hammer and there was a Swiss Army knife there, both of them could get that nail into wood. But which one are you going to pick up? You're going to pick up the tool that's more efficient and more effective, that is more dedicated to the job at hand, right? And so the employer is the same way. So I need you to think about, like, whose hammer are you? Whose tool are you? And how are you going to bring them value and add benefits? Okay. We talked about fishing earlier, right? Imagine today, I'm going to go fishing in the Pacific Ocean, and I set off in my boat and I say, I don't know what I want to catch. I just want to catch a fish. If I don't know what kind of fish I'm going to catch, the ocean's a really big place. If I don't know what kind of bait to take, what kind of tackle to take, do I fish on the surface or on the bottom of the ocean? Do I fish in warm water or cold water? If I don't know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fish for a couple hours, and I'm going to come home hungry, sunburned, and frustrated. And I'm going to say, there's no fish in this ocean. So if you're job hunting right now and you say, no one's hiring, that's just not true. It is a tough market, but people are getting hired still. Companies are still hiring. Even though we're coming up on the holidays, they're still hiring. And so, but what's working and what's making this process faster is the approach that I'm talking about. Is really thinking about, how are you going to add value to the company? And that is what's working. That is the process that is adding value to your job search. And that's what I'm going to teach you today. Is we really want to try to stop trying to appeal to everyone and really think about, what's our focus? What do we have that can meet that customer's needs, and how do we reach them, right? I want you to start thinking of yourself differently. It's not about what you do every day. It's not about your everyday job responsibilities. It's what did you achieve while doing those? How did you add value while doing that? And how can you benefit your future employer, right? That's the important thing. Okay. So let's get into it. A couple of things I want to address before we get into the details of the resume, okay? I throw this one in there because it's important for you to remember that even though adding you to the team, bringing you on board will help that employer, hiring you is not necessarily the first thing on their list. They have a business to run. And oftentimes they're so busy being busy that they don't think about taking the time to hire people, because hiring someone and onboarding them, it's a time-consuming and expensive process. And so I say this to you simply because I just want you to remember that, we feel like it's personal. When they don't call us back, it's because we weren't good enough. It's because we're lacking. And sometimes it's just a matter of the candidate pool that you're a part of. Okay. And sometimes it is just a part of the, what's happening in their business right now. Okay. And so I think that you've got to remember that they have other things going on. And I always say, don't put all your eggs in one basket until you have a job offer or a signed letter in hand. Keep looking. and keep looking out for yourself and your needs, and never put all your eggs in one basket. Okay. And that's just, I just wanted to talk to you about it because I know it's challenging. I know it's frustrating. And, I hear frustration from job seekers. I know it's challenging out there. And I just want you to remember, it's really not personal in this process. And so the method that I mentioned earlier of targeting and focusing the resume, that is something that will get you noticed faster, will have faster results, and you're not sending out 100 resumes a week. And it's that rejection can get to you, right? Even though we say it's not personal, I know it can be frustrating and it can be discouraging. And so I want you to work harder on each application, but send out fewer. And even though it sounds counterintuitive, you will absolutely get better results from each of those. Okay. So be patient, be persistent. Don't be a pest. It's okay to follow up once every other week, but following up daily, probably not the best idea. Okay. And just don't take it personal. Now, I want to talk to you, this is kind of my last myth, if you will, before we dig into the resume itself. And this is an important one because I hear this from people a lot. And that is that there is no kind of evil ATS robot out there auto rejecting you. Now, tell me in the chat if you've ever submitted an application and gotten a rejection within minutes, or I don't know, maybe you submitted it at 10 o'clock at night and then you got a auto reject back, even though you know nobody's working at 10 o'clock at night in this company. And so if that's happened to you, I only saw the one, yes, so far, but I'm sure it's happened to more than one of you. It is most likely that you got an auto reject notice from their system. Okay. But even though that sounds like the system said no to you, there's always a human being behind the system that is sending out those rejection notices. Okay. The human being programmed the system with what's called knockout questions. Do you have whatever it might be? Each company has different requirements, right? It might be, do you have a degree? Yes or no? Some companies have that requirement. Do you have this specific certification? Do you have this X number of years of experience? Any of those things it could be knockout questions, and everybody's different. Every company is different. So those auto rejections are simply because a human being set up a knockout question behind the scenes, and that is what happened. Okay. So just keep in mind that while the system, the software may have rejected you, there's always a human behind it, right? So let's talk about what an ATS that bot is. So ATS stands for Applicant Tracking Software. An applicant tracking software is exactly what it sounds like. It is a system that is intended to track and manage the people that apply to jobs. Okay. So it's a software program that takes information from the resume that you submit and kind of auto populates their internal system with the information from your resume. So it's really all an ATS is it takes and parses information from your resume and auto populates it into their system. That's why it's called applicant tracking software. Unfortunately, there's about 4,000 different ATSs out there. Some are older, some are very new and fancy, and we don't really know who is using what software. And so I'm going to speak to you today about kind of like the commonalities among all of them. And there are things that will prevent your resume from translating effectively from your document to the ATS. So there are things that will stop you in your tracks, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So a couple of things that the ATS can't read. First and foremost, an ATS cannot read information in a formal header. If you have inserted a header to put your name and phone number and email, many ATSs cannot read that information. So when they take your information from your resume to their system, they can't read your name, your phone number, your email, any way of contacting you. That doesn't translate over. Now, do you think that they're going to go back and compare and look for your resume? Probably not. They don't have time. And so it's important for you to know that you don't want to use formal headers. And I will, when we get into talking about contact information, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. Okay. And I'll show you how to format something that'll look nice, but won't use a formal header. Okay. So I will talk to you about that further. Also, an ATS cannot read information in tables. So if you've inserted a table to put content into your resume, it's a really great way of formatting your resume and making it look really cool. But many ATSs cannot read information in tables. ATSs cannot read information in text boxes, and they can't read information in graphics or charts. So if you have these cool graphics and charts that show your sales increases, it looks great to the human, but the ATS cannot bring that information over. So remember, no formal headers, no text boxes, no tables, and some of the older ones can't even read columns. Okay, so again, these are some of the legacy systems. And so we want to just use formatting that we can use within on our keyboard or within Microsoft Word itself. Okay, and so again, ATSs do auto reject you, but the human being behind the scenes is the one that sets up those knockout questions. Okay, and so also the ATS can auto reject you if you haven't put the information in a formatting method that can be imported from your document into the ATS. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to do this without using these formatting elements in your resume. And if you're using like a Microsoft Word template or a Canva template or something you found on Pinterest, chances are those are using these formatting elements like a formal header, tables, text boxes, and they're not compatible with ATSs. I don't know why Microsoft Word uses them. I can't answer that question, but I don't recommend templates at all. You can go out and look at templates. You can look at Pinterest for ideas. You can look at Canva for ideas, but it's really important that we just use simple formatting on our resume so that we're not making our resume incompatible with the ATS. Okay, it's really important to know this. And so there is, again, yes, oftentimes a computer software program are the first eyes on your resume. But again, all it's really doing is taking your resume from your document you've submitted and putting it into their system. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to format your resume today so that it's compatible with that ATS. But I really wanted you to understand what it is and what it does so that we aren't afraid of it. We're just learning to work with it in a way that we ensure that we get our information across appropriately. Now, after the ATS brings your information and it auto-populates their system, then it's going to do a scan of your resume and it's looking for keywords, right? So it's going to say, are you a good match for this position, right? So again, behind the scenes, a human being has set up the keywords they're looking for, the skills and qualifications they want. And oftentimes they're kind of ranking you. They're racking and stacking the resumes, the candidates, based on their percentage of key match. keyword match, excuse me. And so what you want to do is figure out what are the keywords. Now, if it were just as easy as reading the job posting, then everybody would get ranked higher, right? And you may have heard this trick of like, oh, just take the job posting and put it in 2-point font in white font and drop it on the bottom of your resume. That'll get you right through. That's not going to work, by the way. So everything that is in white font on your resume, when it goes into the ATS, turns into black font, and they'll see what you've done, first of all. And secondly, if it were just as simple as the keywords in the job posting, we would all get through. So you want to go back to what I said earlier. You want to go back to that strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, research the company. Do read through the job posting, but also see what's going on in the company's world. Research the industry. What are some of the keywords I need to have in my resume for the industry for which I want to work? And make sure you've integrated those in, okay? And the higher percentage match of your resume keywords to the job, then you're going to get ranked higher in the results. And when you're ranked higher in the results, you're more likely to get reviewed by the recruiter. Now, there are recruiters out there that say, I look at every resume that comes in. And I commend them. But when you've got 500 applicants and they're hired per job and they're hiring for 15, 20 roles, do you really think they're looking at 5,000 resumes? I don't know. I hope so. But we want to make sure that we get on the top of the list, higher ranked, right? And we want to make sure that we get through that scan. And that's really the important part, okay? So think about that. Now, I really want to talk to you about AI before we move on, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, just let AI write your resume. Just just go to ChatGPT and say, write my resume for me. And I'm a big proponent of never letting anyone or anything write your resume for you. Now, I make a living writing resumes, but we're here today to teach you how to do it for yourself. And I still don't write resumes for people. I write resumes with people. And it's really important that you make sure you know every word, that you can speak to every accomplishment, that you can tell the story behind everything on your resume. Because like I said earlier, your resume is just step one. Your resume is really just the ticket in the door. You still have to get in the door, and you have to be able to talk about the things on your resume. So if we let ChatGPT or whatever AI that tool that you want to use write our resume, it's going to make stuff up. That's the bottom line. And the way that these AI tools learned how to write resumes, right? They scraped Reddit threads for resume advice. And so I'm not sure that's who I would want to get my advice from when I was writing my resume. So it's really important that we think about like using AI for what it was meant for. And AI was really not meant to replace the human mind and creativity. AI was meant to be a support. And so think about using it as like a research assistant. You can ask AI, like, hey, here's the job I want to apply for, and here's my background. What are some of the things you think I should highlight? You can ask AI, can you help me rewrite this in a way that would appeal to this type of a role? Like, use AI as a research assistant. Like, remember the SWOT analysis I talked about earlier? Use it to conduct that SWOT analysis, right? So you don't want to use it to replace you, but absolutely it can help you. I was teaching this class 2 weeks ago in person, and I had a guy that said, I'll ask AI to write, a bullet. And then he said he takes that, and his name was Peter. He said, I Peterize it. and he takes it and makes it in his own language, because I'm going to tell you that AI writes in a way that humans don't write. And it's very obvious. You can tell when something wasn't written by a human voice. And so it's really something I want you to think about is I want you to think about making sure that your resume is still written in your voice. Make sure your personality is in there. And that's why I don't advocate for letting anybody write your resume for you. There's a lot of people that you just send your information and they send you back a resume and they never speak to you. Like, how would they know your personality and how you communicate? And so it's important that you put that in there. I don't want a different person to show up to the interview than, who applied to the job. Okay. So that's something I really want you to think about. So again, just wanted to talk to you about the ATS, and I wanted to really address the AI question. So hopefully that'll kind of answer some of that for you. Okay. So again, I'd like to spend the first part of this class kind of just clearing up some myths, changing your perception of the resume. But let's get into it. Let's get into that writing of the resume. And you notice I call it best practices, right? And I call it best practices because you know what? There's not a lot of rules for the resume. And one of the things I'm going to tell you, and I don't know, tell me in the chat, have you ever showed your resume to multiple people to get opinions, like to get feedback and input on your resume? And so, this class today is brought to you by Arizona at Work Pinal County. And you can go to any of the Arizona at Work Pinal County locations and get input on your resume. We're also in partnership with Career Connectors. And Career Connectors has monthly networking meetings. And you can go into a breakout room with someone like me, a certified resume writer, someone in the business, and get input on your resume. And I don't know if this happened to you, but a lot of times when you show your resume to multiple people, everybody has a different opinion on a resume. I think resumes are as subjective as beauty, and we all find beauty in different things beautiful, right? And so I want you to remember that. So here's what I'm going to tell you about your resume. When you show it to someone and they say, you need to change this and this and this, I want you to ask a really important question. And that question I want you to ask is, why? Why should I change that? And we don't need to be combative about it, but just ask them. So when I talk to you today about resume best practices, I'm going to give you a very strong strategic why behind everything that I say. And if you find that I haven't given you that and you want to question that, I'm fine with that. I would love to hear your questions about why, right? So I'm open to having that conversation with you, okay? And so, the why doesn't need to be a lengthy discussion. I'll say, do this, and here's the reason, right? It doesn't need to be a lengthy, representation of that. So again, I just want you to remember that. So if I say, I want you to use this font, and you ask me why, and I'm like, well, because that's my favorite font. Or only use blue on your resume. Well, because that's my favorite color. That's not a good strategic reason, right? So, but I can give you a strategic reason for both of those things in terms of what we should do. And we will talk about it today, okay? All right. Let's get into it. So we're going to start at the top, right? We're going to start at the top of our resume with our contact info. And I always say this is at the top. There's not a lot of rules, but one of the things I will tell you is I want your contact information at the top of your resume. I want you to start with your name, and then I want you to give me your contact info, okay? So the first thing you'll see there is that your exact address is not necessary, right? You do not need to give me your exact address on your resume. You can just put city and state. It's perfectly fine. And for some of you, you're in the far eastern part of the valley. I saw some Casa Grande. I saw some Santan Valley. If you're willing to drive from Casa Grande to Phoenix, that's a drive, right? And so I want you to think about, should you just put, if you're applying to jobs in the Phoenix area, do you think you should just put Greater Phoenix area? Greater Phoenix, Arizona area. That's perfectly acceptable too, right? There are people that will look at your resume and say, well, they're not going to drive from Casa Grande. When I know some of you do it every day, right? So just keep that in mind. You might actually just put the major metropolitan area that you're nearby. Now, if you're in Casa Grande and you're applying to jobs in Casa Grande, that's different. But it depends on where you're applying, and it's okay to just put the location. Like I'm out in Glendale, Arizona, which is really only a 30-minute drive into the downtown area. Well, depending on the time of day, right? It could take an hour. But again, I would probably just put Greater Phoenix, Arizona area on my resume if I were applying to jobs in the downtown area. Okay. So the top one says never in a header, and I promised you I would show you what I mean by this. So let me just quickly just do something. Apologize. Find the right document. So I want to show you. It's weird. I love it when software programs change things and don't tell us. So give me one sec here. Apologize. Okay. So you should be able to see this document on your screen. And this is what I mean by a formal header. Do you see how it's kind of fuzzy, a little faded in the background? And so when I talk about that formal header, this is what I mean. So in order to, if I click once in here, I can't change anything. So if I want to change my email, I have to double click. And then I have to go to close header and footer to get out of it. This is what I mean by a formal header, right? So I have to double click to edit it. Most Microsoft Word templates have formal headers, okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. That's what I mean by a formal header, okay? Now, let's talk about how we can make that same thing happen, but keep it in a way, formatted in a way that works, okay? So let's look at this one now. Oops, hold on one second here. Yeah, make sure we got it blown up. Okay. So if I look at this, this looks very similar, right? It's shaded, it's got borders on it, but this is all done with borders and shading. It's a formatting tool. So I want to change my color. I just highlight my name. I go up here to this borders and shading, and I can change it to blue, right? I can go to my, I can go to my borders, and I can change the color of my border. I can change it to a bright blue, right? So I can change the thickness of my border. Do you see that? I can make it dashed. I can make it whatever I want, but that's where you want to do it. For these are just, I just go in here and I go to insert and symbol, and I put a symbol in there. And then I can get my contact info on as few lines as possible, okay? I want your contact info to take no more than 2 lines. If I take 5 lines to write out my contact info, your resume is very valuable property, right? It's like beachfront property. And we don't have a big backyard when we own a house on the beach. Well, I wouldn't know because I don't own one, but I don't think you would want one, right? And so because your beach is your backyard. So this is just Microsoft Word that I'm using. And I'm just showing you how it's like a Microsoft Word. It's like Microsoft 365. And I know that, you know, maybe some of you don't have Microsoft Word. Every library is going to have access to Microsoft Word. And every workforce connection center. So if you go to like Arizona at Work Pinal County to their in-person location, they will have computers there that you can use Microsoft Word to access and create your resume. But they also, there is a subscription that you can get for Microsoft that I think is less than $10 a month. So those are some options. So I think everybody wants me to show this one more time. So I will show the resume that I was working on. Give me 1 second. Okay, so here you go. So this is, again, I can center this, right? I could do that, make it look centered. I can put it like left justified, however I want to do it, but I'm just using the tools that are within the program itself. Okay. So again, I would just make sure that I have as little space as possible. So my city, state, my phone number, my email address, and my custom LinkedIn URL. So if your LinkedIn URL looks like this, we need to change that, right? So I went into LinkedIn and I created a custom URL that didn't have all those letters and numbers behind it. And if you don't know how to do that, just Google it. All right, we're not going to talk about it today because we're not here to talk about LinkedIn. But there will be a class that we offer on LinkedIn. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's very easy to do. You just need to go in. If you look up how to create a custom LinkedIn URL, it's a very fast, easy process. Okay, let me see if I had any questions. So, okay. So the LinkedIn link, I recommend that, okay, so let's go back to this just to answer the question. So you might notice that this isn't a hyperlink, right? So somebody could copy paste it. I don't like having hyperlinks on my resume because it shows up as blue and underlined. So I don't like to use a hyperlink on a resume because I want consistency. So I want all my font to, be consistent. So having blue font that's underlined is an inconsistency. And so I don't like to have a hyperlink, but you'll notice if I do control and click, it'll allow me to follow that link. Okay. So you'll notice as you hover over them, if you just highlight it and make it black font and not underlined, then you can do that control click as someone hovers over it. So I don't like a hyperlink, and that's why. Most people aren't going to follow a hyperlink because they're not going to get this document from they're going to get this from the ATS. And I don't want it to be, inconsistent because it's going to come over underlined. Okay. So again, I promise I'll always give you my strategic reason as to why. All right, so let's get back to our contact info. So I told you I want never in a header. Hopefully you understand that now that I've shown it to you and what it looks like. I've said your exact address isn't necessary. It's also important that you have a professional email on there. So no hot mama 66 at Yahoo, or I had somebody once, their email was something like, I love Jack Daniels and at whatever.com. And I was like, you got to change that. She's like, but my husband's name is Jack and our last name is Daniels. And I'm like, well, that might be true, but I still want a professional email address. Okay. And I just don't think like expressing your love of Jack Daniels is the way to go. So again, keep that in mind. All right. Also think about what you've named your email. So what you've named your email it's when you set it up. And I once got an email from somebody who the name of their email was in all caps, I need a job, and about 10 exclamation marks. And so that's how they showed up in my email box. And so again, we aren't looking to communicate in that way with our employer. And so make sure that you're easy to find, because the way that your email is named is how it'll show up in there. And if they're looking for you specifically, that you want to make sure your email address is named professionally. Okay. Also make sure you're checking your email. This is really important because I know people who have missed opportunities because they got an email and they didn't read it in time. And so you got to check your email regularly, even if it's just once a day, so that you're going in and getting those messages as they come in. And then also your voicemail is really important. So I can't tell you how many candidates I've called, and I call them and it's like, this person has a voicemail that has not been set up, or this person has their voicemail is full. So make sure you've set up your voicemail, that your recording is professional. I don't want you to be like my nephew who is job hunting, and he's almost 30, and he's a cybersecurity professional, but his voicemail was him when he was 10. He's had his 10-year-old self on his voicemail all these years. And I'm like, you got to change that. He's like, no, I think it's funny. I don't want to change it. Okay, but I'm not sure that they're going to leave a message for 10-year-old you as a cybersecurity person. So again, just some things to think about. If you want to use just the standard greeting, it gives the number they've called so they can verify they've called the right number, and then invites them to leave a message. I am a big proponent of, when I'm in a job search, of not answering the phone when I get a call from someone I don't know. And so let me explain. If you're driving down the road and you've got your dogs or your kids or whatever going on in the car, and you answer the phone, they're going to hear that background noise, right? Also, you might apply to something today and not get a call for a month. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember what I did a month ago. And so when that person calls you and they say, hey, we're calling about this job, we're from this company, and you're like, who? What? And you don't know exactly what they're talking about. So if you let them leave a message, then you can go and pull up your records, because I recommend that you keep really good job search records. Set up a folder in your computer, or if you're a paper person, that it's up to you, but create folders for each company that you're applying to. And in that company folder, you're going to keep all of your research that you're doing. Remember the SWOT analysis I talked about? So keep a folder of all the research that you've done in there. Keep the salary information that you've researched in there. And I highly recommend you attend the salary negotiation class with Brenda. Brenda Mariah hosts that one. A good friend of mine. She does a great job with that. So she can teach you about salary negotiation. And then keep the job posting in there, and the resume and cover letter that you have sent to that, in reply to that job. Okay, so then they leave you a message, you go get on your computer, pull up your information, you study it really quick, have it in front of you, you call them back, and now when they ask you questions, you have it all in front of you. And so you're speaking in a much more informed, professional manner than if you're just driving down the road and you have no idea who's calling you. Okay. Many years ago, my husband was in a job hunt, and I told him the same thing. I'm like, don't answer the phone. You don't know who's calling. And he answered the phone at Disneyland. And he didn't listen to me. I can't believe who could believe it, right? And so he answers the phone, and they're like, hey, we were wondering if we would be available for an interview. And he said, sure, when were you thinking? And they're like, how about now? And so he's like, well, can you give me 10 minutes? So he had to go find a quiet place at Disneyland to conduct an interview. And I don't know, there's not really a lot of quiet places at Disneyland. And so luckily he was well prepared for the interview, and did okay with it, but again, not the best environment for him to answer the phone when he's in a job search. So that's just my 2 cents about why I recommend you don't, you don't answer the phone. All right. But make sure you have a good professional voicemail, and you're cleaning it out regularly, and you are returning people's calls. Okay. And then the other thing about email, I just will say, is I recommend that you have a separate email that's just for job hunting. because there will be, there are some scams out there. There are some spam going around out there. And I would rather you not have to kind of sift through that in your regular email. So maybe you just have one that is a separate email. I recommend a Gmail. Try to stay away from like Hotmail and AOL, which just is it is a little bit of an age giveaway when you've got a Hotmail or an AOL. And keep in mind with Yahoo Mail tends to send a lot of things into spam that have attachments or links included. And the employer might have included like a calendar link to schedule an interview. So if you're using Yahoo, and really I've just all of them, I would just recommend checking your junk mail folder regularly to make sure you haven't missed anything important. Okay. And so, yeah, investors asked about having an Excel spreadsheet. I personally just use folders within Microsoft Word, but you can absolutely use an Excel spreadsheet, and that'll help you track like who you follow, who you talked to, when you followed up, when you applied, what's happening, and allows you to be organized and just kind of track what you're doing. It's really up to you and how you want to manage that process. I am not a big Excel aficionado. Like I can create a spreadsheet, but like it depends on how good you are with that. So, and how you use that. So again, as I said on this one, use that minimum amount of space. I recommend no more than 2 lines for your contact info. And then be sure you create that custom LinkedIn URL so you can put that LinkedIn URL address on your resume. And just know that people are going to go to your LinkedIn and check you out. It's kind of that quick background investigation, if you will, so they can just make sure that what you've used to apply is kind of the same person you are online. So just know that they are going to look for you on LinkedIn. So if you're not already on LinkedIn, you definitely want to get on there, because I do feel like LinkedIn is as important as resumes these days. And you definitely want to have a presence on LinkedIn so that they can find you. And it shouldn't be a copy paste of your resume. But again, story for another day. All right, so that is your contact info. Now, as we're kind of moving down the resume, excuse me, the next section I want to talk about is your summary. It could be, you could call it your profile, your summary. It's really just a brief section on your resume that gives your highlights. It tells us a little bit about you. So think about it as the cliff notes of your resume. If they weren't going to read any other part of your resume, what could you tell them in a brief, 5 to 7 line paragraph, or 3 to 4 bullet points, whichever you decide to use? How could you demonstrate your value to that employer? Give me your highlight reels. Okay. So that's your summary section. Now, I always recommend you have your contact info at the top, not at the bottom, not down the side, at the top. So they see immediately that you've given them a way to contact you. And then I always recommend that your summary come next. So you really don't want to go straight from your contact info right into your work experience. I recommend that you put something in there, some kind of a summary that just sort of leads them into your resume and gives them a place that they can just go get a quick overview of your qualifications. So your summary is at the top of your resume. It is a great place for you to tell them exactly what kind of a job you're looking for. Your very first line of your summary, which we're going to work on writing together here today, it should tell them exactly the kind of job you're looking for. It clarifies your focus. It tells them, here is the job I'm applying for. Now that sounds kind of like one of those things where like, well, of course they see what I'm applying for. But you would be amazed at how many people apply for jobs and don't take the time to customize their resume, and they're not a match at all on paper. And even though they have the qualifications, they have the experience, they're sending out that generic resume that we talked about earlier, and they haven't taken the time to really think about, like, how am I uniquely qualified for this role. So that's what your summary is all about, okay? It should be brief. It should be, like I said, 3 to 7 lines at the top. Doesn't need to be a lot. I'm talking 3 to 7 typewritten lines, which is typically like four sentences or so, okay? And this is where you showcase what you're seeking and why you're qualified. That's really what your summary is all about, okay? We don't use an objective. That is something we do not do anymore. We don't write, seeking a challenging position and a career that offers growth. No, we don't put that, because that basically says, I have no idea what I want to do. So we're going to write a targeted headline and a targeted summary instead. Okay. And I will give you some examples here in a minute, and I will help you write that first line. But first, let's talk about what we want our summary to answer. These are some questions that we want to answer with our summary. Okay. First of all, what do you specialize in? What do you do best? Right? What makes you cost effective at doing it? Right? So why are you going to be valuable to the employer? How are you going to bring them benefits? So we're going to tell them that right in our summary. Okay. And then what experience do you have? Like, how many years of experience do you have? And also we're going to tell them like the certifications, the education that we might bring to the table. Okay, if it's important to the role. And then what are some of our most important skills that we have, right? So what skills help us bring value to the organization? And then this would be a good place to put things like software, specific software that we need, or if we have a security clearance or something that we might have that makes us uniquely qualified. Okay, so let's look at this. I'll go back to my sample, and let me pull that one up. Come on. Okay. So this is our summary, and I want to start by writing that first sentence, but I want to give you a couple of examples. So here is a paragraph style, right? So you'll see that paragraph style of our summary. It's what, 7 lines, I think. And here is a bullet point example. So I said 3 to 7 lines of a paragraph, or 3 or 4 bullets. You can choose what style you like best. There is no right or wrong here. I just want to keep it brief and relevant and targeted. Okay. And so again, you don't want your whole first page taken up by summaries and highlights and core competencies. We got to get them to read our work experience. That's really where we're going to give them the big sales pitch, where we're really going to demonstrate our qualifications. And so it's important that we really get to that work experience as quickly as possible. So your contact info and your summary really shouldn't take more than the top quarter of your resume. Okay. So we will get into like how long the resume should be and all that good stuff here in a bit. But let's talk about writing this first sentence. Okay. And I want to help you write your first sentence. And this is like a structure for it. Okay. And so I want your, like, what do you specialize in? How many years of experience do you have? What education or certification do you bring? And what's the scope of what you've done? Okay. So I see that Iris asked a question. I have 10 years of experience in project work, 4 years as a manager. Okay. So we could say project manager with 10 years of experience in the project management industry, 4 years at the management level. That could be the way that I address that I have 10 years total, but 4 years as a manager. Okay, so hopefully that helps you, Iris. But again, you see this human resources manager with 10 years of experience managing HR programs for global organizations with up to 3,000 personnel. So what do I specialize in? I'm a human resources manager. How many years of experience do I have? And the scope is that global organization up to 3,000 personnel. We come down here for our operations manager. Again, you see, what do I do? I'm an operations manager. How many years of experience do I have? And what's the scope? 30,000 employees, $25 million budgets. So that's what I mean by the scope, okay? And this really fits at the entry level all the way up to the executive level. That first sentence really should just kind of lead you in to your qualifications. But we're going to tell them in that very first line, how are we qualified? What are we looking for? And how are we qualified? So I want to give you a second to write yours. Okay, so here's my parameters, right? So we've got, what do you specialize in? How many years of experience do you have? What level of education or certification do you bring? Again, if that's important, right? And then what's the scope? So if you want to take a minute to write your first line of your summary, if you want to drop it in the chat, I'd be happy to help you work on it. Or if you want to ask any questions, but I want to just give you a few minutes to think about that first line of your summary. And if anybody needs assistance, I'm here to help you. Okay, so I'm just going to take like 2 minutes here and let you work on that. And I'm going to leave this up so you can kind of get a sense of the structure of that first line. Okay. And just remember the questions I told you about earlier. What do you specialize in? What makes you valuable or cost effective? What are your unique qualifications? And that's what goes in your summary. So I mentioned that the summary should always go at the top. But I want to tell you that for me, when I write a resume, I do this last. The last thing I write is the summary section. And for me, it's important. It belongs at the top of the resume. And I talk about it at this point in writing the resume because that's the order in which it goes. But really, I think you'll know more about what are your highlights after you've written your work experience. Okay, but I see that we've got one person who's put theirs in. So, okay, senior consultant with 15 years of experience leading large-scale transformation projects. Okay, so it's Desiree. Okay, so Desiree, what you call large-scale and I call large-scale could be different, right? So large scale could be, so in order to the scope, I might, instead of saying large scale, I might say, how many people on your project teams, or what were your budgets that you managed, right? So I would like to know a little bit more about the scope in that way, because if they're looking for a project manager that can manage a $20 million budget, it's important to show in there that that's kind of the scope at which you've managed projects too. So that would be my only recommendation here is putting in some actual dollar amounts, or like how many people you've brought together on your project teams. Okay. So, okay. All right. So I don't see anybody else in the chat, but I just wanted to give you this kind of insight into the summary section. Like I said, I write it last almost always because it's something that once you've finished all of your work experience, you kind of start to see those common threads, the value statements that you've brought together for that in your resume. And that makes it a little bit easier for you to highlight what you've done. But again, it just depends on how you're writing your resume. But I wanted to talk about it first because it should come at the top of your resume. Okay. So, all right, let's move on from our summary and let's talk work experience. Boy, this one is important. Okay. This is the meat and potatoes of your resume. This is where your really going to showcase what you do well. This is where you're going to highlight what you did, right? But oops, wrong button. Instead of talking about what you did all day, instead, we are going to highlight the results of what you accomplished. Okay, so we're focusing on the value that we bring. Excuse me. We are really thinking about how did we add benefits? How did we make a difference? What result did we achieve? And that's what needs to go in your work experience. So I'm going to walk you through kind of how to transform your bullets from generic to impactful. And that's what we're going to get into next. We're going to be on work experience here for a while. You can tell me this in the chat. Is there, do you feel really uncomfortable talking about yourself? Do you feel like I don't like to talk about myself? I'm very humble, right? I don't want to brag. And so people often really that stops them in their tracks when they have to write about themselves. And I'll tell you that if you don't get comfortable marketing yourself and showcasing your accomplishments and your value, no one's going to do it for you. It's really important that you own what makes you good at your job. And I don't want you to brag. I don't. I do not want you to be an arrogant candidate. But there is a very slight difference between arrogance and confidence. An arrogant person walks into the room and says, I am the smartest person in this room. Where a confident person walks into the room and says, I'm one of the smart people in this room. An arrogant person puts themselves better than or above everyone else, but a confident person simply knows their value. They simply know the facts of what they make them good at their job. If I were to say to you, like, I'm the best resume writer in the world, that's just simply not true. It's not a fact. I'm not saying that I'm not good at what I do, but I can't tell you that I've received, 6 awards for being the best resume writer. And so, but what if I were to say to you, like, I'm a good resume writer because I really understand the concept of strategic marketing. And I am really good at helping people identify their value to create sales focused, targeted resumes that get their phone to ring and gets them interviews. That second statement, I can back up with references, with examples and stories, with statistics. I can't back the first statement up because it's just simply not fact-based. And so I think you've got to think about, what are your facts? What is it that you do really well? And it's important that you own that. And it doesn't make you arrogant. It doesn't make you brag if you talk about your value. It simply says you know your worth. So I really want you to think about that. How can you showcase that you're cost effective, that you're worth the money they're going to pay you? Why did they bring you on board? And once you got into that role, how did you make a difference? Okay. And that's what I want you to think about. How did you make a difference? So, it's interesting because, and I think I just saw it with Lydia said, like, I did my job. I just did my job. And I hear that a lot from people. Like, I just was, fill in the blank. I just did my job. And so I had a lady say this to me once. I was just a daycare provider. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So how many kids did you watch and what were their ages? She's like, well, I have, 5 to 6 kids, anywhere from newborn to 5 years old. That sounds easy. And I said, well, how many of them did you lose when they were in your care? of course, I never lost any kids. And I'm like, how many of them were seriously injured because of your negligence? How many of them went hungry every day? Or, sat around in dirty diapers? And of course, she was indignant. I'm like, none of that happened. And I'm like, well, those are measurable accomplishments, right? We just have to figure out how we talk about it, but those are still accomplishments. And Lydia, I hope that I can help you identify some of your value today, so that you don't say, I just showed up. I just did my job. I doubt that, right? And so you can, and I'm going to show you how to revise your bullet points, how to add that value to them, okay? And I don't want you to brag, okay? But I know you did more than just show up, okay? And so I want you to think about the facts of what you did every day that added value to your former employers, okay? So that's really what I want we want to think about. And Lydia, if you stick around to the end and you want to come unmute and talk to me, I'll be happy to help dig out some of those things for you. But I hope that before then you'll already feel it, okay? So let's get into it. So as we're writing our resume bullets, these are the important statements. And I'm going to show you, I'll go back to that sample resume, and we're going to kind of talk through how to structure your resume and how to lay it out. But I want to talk about the bullet points, right? These are our work experience bullet points that I want to talk to you about now. And so they're all going to start with action verbs. We're going to avoid job description language like responsible for and duties included, right? We're going to stay away from that kind of language. And we're going to start with action verbs. But it's important that we don't start every bullet with the same word. If we were a manager, it shouldn't say manage, managed, because people will stop reading after a while if they think we're being repetitive. So we want to start with action verbs, but we also don't need to get out the thesaurus and get crazy and use words that we would never use in a sentence, like honchoed and ramrodded and whatever. So we don't need to speak in a way that we wouldn't talk to people. So that's something that I really want to talk about, is that I don't write in a fancy way that I would never speak about myself. Okay. So I want you to use your communication style. Now, if you have like colorful language, you can leave those out of your resume, but again, you want to think about like speaking in a way that showcases how you communicate with the world, okay? We're going to focus on results, focus on how we made a difference. We're going to stay away from just like those everyday job responsibilities and really focus on the impact statements instead, okay? And we're going to prove our abilities by using our examples and accomplishments from the past. So what we did in the past is going to prove our ability to continue doing that job going forward, okay? And then we want to make sure that every bullet answers the question of, so what? What does that mean? Well, I'm going to keep you here, but we are going to take a 10-minute break, and I'm going to answer that question. Like, what does that mean? Every bullet needs to answer the so what question. But I'm going to send us out on a break, and we will come back in about 10 minutes, 10:30 a.m. my time, Mountain Time. And for those of you that are here in Arizona, it'll be 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time for you too. And we will come back in 10 minutes, and we'll talk about getting your bullets working better for you. Okay, so I'll see you guys here in a few minutes, okay? When you're low and your knees can't rise, you feel helpless and you're looking to the sky. Some people would say to accept defeat
Well, if this is fate, then we'll find a way to cheat. 'Cause we'll say a little prayer. The door, if the answer isn't fair, you know you can call on me when you need somebody. You can call on me when you can't stop the tears from falling down. From falling down. When you weary and the road is long, and I'll guide you with the beating of my heart. And if the Calvary and the help don't come, well then we'll find a way to dodge a smoking gun. And so we'll say a little prayer. But if the answer isn't fair, then call on me. When you need somebody. When you can't stop the tears from falling down. You can't stop the tears from falling down.
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best. Yeah, hey, every day can be a better day despite the challenge. All you gotta do is leave it better than you found it. It's gonna get difficult to stand, but hold your balance. I just say whatever, cause there is no way you're around it. Everyone falls down sometimes, but you just gotta know it'll all be fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best. Hey, some days you wake up and nothing works, you feel surrounded. Gotta give your feet some gravity to get you grounded. Keep good things inside your ears just like the waves and sound it. And just say whatever, cause there is no way you're grounded. Everyone falls down sometime, but you just gotta know it'll all be it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best. Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best.
I don't know what you've been told, but time is running out. No need to take it slow. I'm stepping to you toe to toe. I should be scared, honey, maybe so, but I ain't worried about it right now. Keeping dreams alive, 1999 heroes. I ain't worried about it right now. Swimming in the floods, dancing on the clouds below. I ain't worried about it. I ain't worried about it. I don't know what you've been told, but time is running out, so spend it like it's gold. I'm living like I'm not zeros. Got no regrets even when I'm broke. Yeah, I'm at my best when I got something I'm wanting to steal. They're too busy for them problems and problems to feel. Yeah, yeah, no stressing, just obsessing with sealing the deal. I'll take it in and let it go, but I ain't worried about it right now. Keeping dreams alive, 1999 heroes. I ain't worried about it right now. Swimming in the floods, dancing on the clouds below. I ain't worried about it. I ain't worried about it. I ain't worried about it right now. Keeping dreams alive, 1999 heroes. I ain't worried about it right now. Swimming in the floods, dancing on the clouds below. I ain't worried about it. I ain't worried about it. I ain't worried about it.
All right, welcome back. Hopefully everybody had time to grab something to drink, use the restroom. Let's get back to it. So right before we left on break, I said I was going to teach you how to rewrite your bullet points. So let's dig into that, because this is a definitely a in-depth process, and I really want to teach you how to write bullets that are making an impact, right? So I said that really important question of so what. So let me explain what I mean by this. When you read a bullet point on your resume, you should be able to know the so what behind it. So when I say this, I mean like, so what impact did it make? So what difference did it make for the employer? So what would have happened if you hadn't done that? Right? So, you know, the person that said, well, I was just a daycare provider. Well, so what? So what would have happened if you hadn't done your job well? Those children would not have been well cared for or safe or fed. And so really think about the why behind what you did. It's that's what I mean. When I say so what, I want you to keep looking at your bullets, and really I want you to go look at your resume kind of line by line, bullet by bullet, and tell me that, have you answered that so what question? And I'll demonstrate this to you with a couple of different bullets here in a second, but let's really try to get rid of the word just from our vocabulary, okay? And I really want you to think about what the bottom of this slide says, and it's about measurable outcomes, right? I want to think about adding numbers and metrics to the resume whenever possible. So we want to add numbers for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, numbers help someone understand the scope of what we've done. And remember, we put scope into that very first line of our resume, and it tells people, the scope of what you've impacted. How many people have you managed? What's the budget that you've overseen? How many customers did you help in an hour? Like, if you're a cashier, like, what was your transaction rate? What was your accuracy rate for your cash drawer, right? Those metrics really help someone see that you take what you do seriously and that you really think about making an impact, okay? So measurables can be time saved, cost saved, sales growth. It could be efficiency optimized. So it could be dollar amounts, it could be percentages, it can be just the number of people that you served or that you supervised. Those numbers are important for that reason. Obviously, it shows that scope. It shows that you took kind of a results-based approach to what you did. But it also, when you have a number in a document, like studies show us, as people, as the human eye is reading through a document full of words, when the eye sees a number, it will stop and read the information that is around that number. So by putting numbers into your resume, you're getting people to read more of that resume, okay? And so we want to put numbers whenever possible. Now, you probably, if you're a rule follower of grammar, you know that every number from 0 to 10 is supposed to be spelled out. That's the rule of grammar. In this case, I want you to break that rule. And whenever you can use a number, whenever you talk about a metric, a number, always use the numeral, okay? Even if it's a 2, because of that, getting that eye engaged in your resume, okay? We're gonna write our bullets in the formula that I just put in the chat. So we use what's called situation, task, action, result. That's kind of the framework for your bullet. You're gonna explain the situation or task that you were assigned. You're going to explain the action that you took to deal with that situation or accomplish that task. And then you're going to highlight the result of it. That's the so what part, is the so what impact. So what difference did it make? So what value did it add? But what I really want you to do is write in the RATS formula. So we're going to shake this up, and we're going to start with the result. Saved $300 an hour in productivity, right? So we're going to start with that measurable, right? And so, yeah, so just exactly like what Iris shows, like ranked in the top 5% of performers, excuse me. I would even say out of how many people were you up against, right? So if you're in the top 5% of 700 people nationwide, that's a big deal. And so again, I would go on, Iris, to say like, well, so what? How did that add value? What did you do to be ranked in the top 5%? So let's make it even stronger and push it a little further. So the reason I want you to front load your bullets with the results and start with those results is that, again, studies show us when people are skimming a line of bullet points, they'll read the first 3 to 5 words of each bullet. And if all of your bullets start with an impact statement, with a result, and with a measurable whenever possible, you're going to get them to read more of your resume. And they're really going to, so what I always tell people is a good resume, they'll read the whole thing from top to bottom, because that's just not a given always, that they're going to read your entire resume. So we want a good resume that they'll read the entire thing. But what we really want is a great resume. And a great resume makes them feel compelled to call you. Remember that I talked about whose hammer are you earlier, right? A great resume makes them feel like I need that person to come and do that for my company. And that's what we really want. We want a great resume that highlights our value, that showcases how we make a difference. That's what we want, okay? Is we want somebody to see from reading our resume exactly how we can plug into their organization and make that similar impact for them, okay? So that it's really important that we showcase that. Now, let's talk about numbers for a minute, because numbers really aren't verifiable, right? Like there's no way that someone's going to be able to look at our resume and say, okay, like prove this number to me. I mean, they can't go dig it up and research it. And so, no, this is not me saying, just guess or just let ChatGPT make it up for you. That's not what I'm saying. So what I want you to think about is, although the numbers are not verifiable, we better be able to tell the story of how we came up with that number. And that's one of the reasons I say don't let anyone write your resume for you, not even a tool like AI, because you have to be able to tell the story of how you did that. So your resume is the highlight of that accomplishment. And then when that makes them say, I need to hear how they did this, that gets them to call you, and then you can tell the full story. So we may have to estimate a number, or we may have to, kind of back our way into a number if we don't know the exact amount. I'll give you an example. Let's just say that I am a production manager and I identified that my technicians were wasting productivity every day because they would have to walk over to another building, a different building, to check out a tool that they use to do their job every day. And so I saw that they were wasting time walking back and forth. And so I reallocated the production floor to bring that tool to them so that it saved them time. So they only had to walk, a few feet as opposed to 3 buildings over, right? And I said, yeah, that's something that I suggested, and it saved productivity. And I say, well, how much? And I don't know. I just know it was better. So this is how I would estimate this number with you. The first thing I would say is, how long did it take to walk from the production floor to that other building, check out the tool, and come back? And we'll just say it was 15 minutes. And then my next question would be, like, how many times a day on average did a technician have to walk back and forth? And we'll just say twice a day, okay? So now we're 15 minutes times twice a day. For that technician, each technician was 30 minutes saved. So my next question is, well, how many technicians are on the team? And you tell me there's 10. So we've got 10 people times 30 minutes a day. We're at 300 minutes. 300 minutes divided by 60 is 5 hours. So I save 5 hours of productivity a day, okay? Now I'm gonna multiply that by 5. That's 25. I'm gonna multiply 25 by 52, which is how many weeks there are in a year. And now we're up in the 2,500 hour range, okay? So do you see how I'm getting these numbers? Now, I don't know that that's exact, so here's how I would write that bullet. Saved an average of 2,500 plus productivity hours after using Lean Six Sigma principles to reorganize maintenance shop floor layout. Okay, so that's how we start to think about, okay, well, I know I did this. I don't know how much it improved it. Let's see if we can't back our way into a number. So you might have to do the same, right? Sometimes we've got to estimate, and we can use language like an average of, or up to, or put a plus on the end, but we don't want to just grab that number out of the air. We want to be able to walk the employer through that same process that we used to estimate that value that we added, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. If there are some numbers that you're just not sure about, that's one way for you to go about getting those numbers. So let's really dig in, and let's start rewriting our bullet points. So we've got this one. It says, I manage projects, right? So again, we don't use the words I, me, and my in a resume. So I manage projects would just go be managed projects, right? Well, that doesn't really say much. So I ask the so what question. Well, like, so what? So what impact did you make? So what value did you add? Now we've got 2 bullet points out of that give a little bit more detail, right? We go to led up to 17% cross-functional project teams, managed an average of 7 annual projects, and we've got budgets of up to $2 million. Now you know the scope of my impact. How many projects am I managing in a year? Tells you like what I can handle, the budgets, how many people are on my teams. Then I want to get into a little bit more. So what? So, well, did I do a good job at it? And now we get into like my success rate of on time, in budget completion, and how did I do that, right? So there, obviously this is more words, right? Going from managed projects to these 2 bullet points. And it's never about adding more words just to add more words. It's about showcasing keywords. Got a lot of keywords in those 2 bullets that I didn't have. And when I just said I manage projects, and showing impact and value. Okay. So, like I said, numbers can't be verified, but you better be able to explain them. You better be able to tell the story, because your resume is just step 1. It gets you in the door for the interview, but you darn well better be able to support that resume once you get in the door. Where did you come up with this information, right? So how did you get to these numbers? And what are some of the skills that you use to get there? That's what the interview is about. The resume is about determining, are you qualified? Do you have the experience and skills you need to do the job? Then you get into the interview, and it's about validating and verifying that you are in fact qualified, but it's also about, do you fit into the team? Does your communication style, your personality, your, what you do, does it add a good dynamic to the team? And remember, we talked about earlier, you don't get the job. It could be lots of different reasons that you don't get that job. And it could just be the team dynamic not necessarily being the right fit for you. And that's okay. Okay. So let's do this with another one. Let's say that I have a bullet on my resume that says answered phones. So what? Again, so what impact did you make? So what value did that add? So let's see if we can't do this. And I'll give you some kind of 3 bullets that can come from answered phones. So I don't have this on a written out, so but I'll just read it to you. So I say, received and routed an average of 30 hourly calls while answering questions, providing product details, and representing the company with professionalism. Okay, so I start to say, here's the scope, and here are some of the skills and the value that I added. I could push this a little further, and I could say I reduced customer hold times by an average of 30 seconds by working efficiently and with a sense of urgency to provide expedited customer service. Again, I could push it even a little further, and I could say that I gained in-depth product knowledge to answer customer questions, reducing forwarded calls by 25% and freeing up the floor sales team to engage customers. So Ren, yeah, I just answered phones. Well, what was the impact of you answering phones? Were you representing the company? Were you providing customer service? Were you answering questions so that they didn't have to go to the sales team? Were you getting to them as quickly as possible so people didn't get annoyed while they were waiting on hold? Do you see that this is how we want to start writing? People often ask me, Lori, how do I stand out from the crowd? If there's 500 applicants to a job, how do I stand out from the crowd? And this is how you do it. It's not about having a fancy resume that's formatted and looks pretty to the eye. The ATS doesn't care about that. What the ATS cares about is the keywords that you put in there and the value that you show. So then when the human gets to it, they see exactly how they can plug you into their organization, and you can immediately bring that return on investment. Okay, that's how you set yourself apart from the crowd. And that's really the difference that I want you to make with your resume today. So let's dig into how this lays out. So let me just pull up the resume again that I have for you. And let's talk through it. Give me a sec, I gotta find it. So what happens when you have too many things open on your desktop? Okay, so we've talked about our summary. We talked about our 2 different styles of summary. Now, here is how I recommend you lay out your professional experience, okay? You've got your job title, and I recommend that you bold your job title. And then you have your company name and your city and state. You don't have to put the city and state there if you don't want to. And then your dates. Now, personally, I use only numbers to put dates, and I do that because it takes up less space. And I am always trying to use less space on a resume because, again, it's very limited, valuable real estate, and I want to optimize the space that I have. So you put your to and your from dates, or if you're currently working, you put to present, okay? And then right under your job title, I recommend a 3 to 5 line little brief paragraph that tells me kind of the scope of your responsibilities. How many people do you supervise? How many customers do you assist? How many executives do you support as an administrative assistant? Like those types of like, give me an overview of your responsibility. That's your little intro paragraph, is an overview of what you do every day or did every day. And then under that, no more than 5 to 7 bullets per job of your accomplishments, your value, and your contributions, okay? That's your layout for your work experience, okay? Is your 3 to 5 lines of scope and then 5 to 7 bullets. If your resume has like 20 bullet points in a row, people are gonna eventually stop reading those bullets. They say that any more than 5 or 7 bullets any more than 5 to 7 bullets are going to be too much, and people aren't going to read beyond that. Okay, so again, those you want to try to keep it condensed. Now let's just say that you've been in a high level position and you've had a lot of responsibilities. Maybe you break it down into categories and you put like skill categories under your job, and that way you can have like just small groups of bullet points. But I don't recommend more than 7 bullets in a row. Okay, so is there a chance you're saying you're telling too much information? It's possible. Okay, so again, you want to think about relevance to the employer. And we might have things on our resume that we're really proud of, but they really don't matter to the people that we're trying to reach. And we've got to make those hard decisions sometimes to get rid of things that aren't necessarily valuable. Okay, so let me show you this on an actual resume. So we've got here's like our little headline and our tagline, our summary, and then here's our experience. Okay, so we've got our job title, our company name, the city and state. Don't you wish there was something called Gila Monster Credit Union? I think that'd be fun. And then our to and from dates, our 3 to 5 lines of scope. What are we responsible for? And anywhere from, like, this one just has 3, but you know, again, you can have 3, you can have 5, but no more than 7 bullets in a row. Okay, so we see that we've got those first 3 to 5 words. Okay, we've got received and processed 500 to 600 monthly cases. Improved customer privacy protection, 23%. Reduced errors and expedited processing, 25%. Like, oops, I just found a typo on my resume, my fake resume. And so again, we're trying to grab their attention and front load with results. Okay, so we've talked about transforming your bullets. We've talked about answering the so what question. I've kind of showed you how to lay out a resume. what questions can I answer for you? Is there anything in the chat? Let's see if I missed anything. Do you feel like your bullets look like this already? Or is this a new way for you of thinking about your bullet points? Remember, again, we oftentimes think of our resume as a work history. And we address that early on in the class. It's not just a work history. It's not just a detailed description of all of our responsibilities and duties. That is not what's going to get you through. What's going to get you through is that measurable results that we're demonstrating. Okay. Now, I don't have a slide for it, but I do want to talk a little bit about formatting. Okay. So, and we're going to get into some more details on the resume, and we're going to move all the way down to our education and certifications and all of that stuff. But I want to talk about a couple of things, a couple of formatting issues that that I want to mention to you. So has anybody out there heard you have to be on one page? Your resume must be one page. And this is a common misconception, unfortunately, that's out there. And it's just not true unless you are a pilot. So if we have any pilots in the room, you got to be on one page. Pilots have a very specific way of writing their resume. But if you're not a pilot, then you can be on 2 pages if you need to. Okay. So here's the thing. If you can fit everything you need to say and say it effectively in 1 page, that's great. But most of us can't fit onto a single page and say everything we need to say and highlight our experience and our accomplishments. So there's nothing wrong with your resume being 2 pages long. It is absolutely acceptable for your resume to be 2 pages long. However, I said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again. It is very important that your whole first page not be fluff. Highlights and core competencies and summaries, that stuff should take up no more than the top 1/4 to 1/3 of your resume. You've got to get the good stuff, which is your work experience, your accomplishments, your value statements. That's got to start on the first page. If that doesn't happen, a lot of times what they'll do is they're just going to go straight past that first page and go to the second page because they want to know what your work experience is. And so make sure that you don't use up so much of your first page on those highlights and overviews that you don't get to your work experience until page 2. Okay, so it's really important that that information starts on page 1. We need to give them a compelling reason to get to page 2, or they're just not going to get there. And the way we get them to read through the entire document, remember, is by showcasing that value, talking about your accomplishments, giving them that so what of the bullet points. Okay, so 2 pages is fine. Very few people need to be more than 2 pages, right? Again, we're talking private sector. If you want to work for the federal government, that's a whole nother ball game. But in the private sector, the only people that need to be more than 2 pages long are doctors, lawyers, and professors, because they have other sections they need to add. They do more of a CV style for those 3 categories. So, but anybody else, even a person who is an executive leader, should really only be on 2 pages or less. Like I'm writing a resume for an executive right now, and he will be on 2 pages. Okay. So it's really important that we keep that in mind. If you're going beyond 2 pages, probably you've gone too far back in your work experience and you're giving more detail than you need to. Okay. So that's my page length talk. Now let's talk about some formatting aspects. The font style that you use, I recommend very few fonts. And one of the reasons I do, let me give you, I'm going to put them in the chat. These are really like the few that I recommend. There's not a lot. And most of them, you'll notice, are called sans serif fonts. And when I say they're, I'll show you really quick. let me go back to that resume we looked at. So a sans serif font doesn't have the little feet, like a serif font is going to have the little feet on the end of like the N's and the L's, the like little tick marks. Now that used to be really important because ATSs couldn't scan fonts that had those. And that's not really an issue anymore. So you'll notice I did put one serif font in there, which is Cambria. But the reason I recommend just these few fonts, quite honestly, is that these fonts are in every version of Microsoft Word, and they'll also convert to Google Docs and what's it called in Apple? I think it's called Pages. And so it converts across all of those platforms, because if I use an obscure font that I really like, or that I went out and specifically downloaded, I don't know if I send it to somebody that doesn't have that font, I don't know how it's going to turn out. Some fonts turn into wingdings. Some fonts turn into Courier font, which looks like old typewriter font. So, and they're probably not going to change it. If your resume comes across as like wingdings, which is a whole bunch of symbols, they're not going to go look for you. They're not going to go and highlight it and change it back, right? So just know that that's why I have a handful of fonts that I recommend, because they're simple, easy to read, but most importantly, they're commonly used across all the different platforms, okay? And Desiree asked, how long should a CV be for a lawyer? And it really, there is no limit. It's really about your publications. It's about some of the case highlights. So it's about your coursework in school. So I've written them anywhere from 3 to 5 pages for doctors, lawyers, and professors. So there's really not a limit for them, okay? Okay, so going back to formatting. So we talked page length, we talked font. Let's talk about consistency. It's important that you maintain consistency in the style of font that you use. So pick one font and stick with it throughout the whole resume. In the size of the font that you use. Now, the one difference here is I have no problem with like your name and your headline being larger font. Those are things we want to stand out, but the rest of the document should be a consistent font size, okay? You want to use consistent margins. So if you've indented your bullets to, this place, I want all your bullets to be indented to there. So consistent spacing, indentation. It doesn't matter to me if your bullets are circles or dashes or arrows. What matters to me are you use the same style throughout, okay? So consistent font size, consistent spacing, consistent bullet usage. And so then also I want you to proofread your document, okay? There are companies out there, there are people out there that one error and they will not move forward with you as a candidate. Now, I don't know, sometimes I might say you dodge a bullet on some of these situations, but if they're that strict, that's important to them, that's their prerogative. So just make sure that you're proofreading your document and that it's error-free. Some of the biggest issues, commonly misspelled words, I just put one in the chat. And that one, people often use that word instead of manager. They miss the A, the second A. And then also people get these two confused, the lead versus lead, right? So if I led people in the past tense, I use LED. LEAD, when you say it as lead, is a mineral? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, it's not what you meant, okay? So those, you want to make sure that we're using the right words. So my recommendation to you is I want you to, when you finish your document, if you can print it out, that's great. But if you can't, just make it larger on your screen. And I want you to read it, excuse me, out loud in backwards order. So what I mean is I want you to start at the word in the lower right-hand corner and read those words in backwards order, because what's gonna do is it's gonna mix it up in your brain. You're gonna see it differently. And when you come across that word manger, your brain, if you're reading it in the right way, your brain will substitute what you meant. But if you read it backwards, you'll see those words. They'll jump off the page to you, the ones that are actual words but are misspellings, and you'll see those issues that you've made, okay? Those mistakes that you've made. And so if you are saying that you have meticulous attention to detail, yet your resume is full of errors, they're not going to believe what you say. They're going to believe the evidence. So just remember that this is a representation of you on a piece of paper, and take the time to read it and proofread it. And then after you've read it in backwards order, I want you to read it out loud to yourself as it's written, so that you can identify, like, okay, that sentence made no sense, or that is way too many commas, or I need to break that into 2 separate lines, or whatever the case may be. You'll start to see, like, oh, that didn't really make much sense. I better rewrite that, okay? And so read it out loud in the proper order so you can find those run-on sentences or those sentences that don't make sense. So just be sure that you proofread it. Let's talk about like formatting elements. So you'll see on the document that I showed you, I used some color. I stayed really neutral, blues, greens, pale yellows, grays. I opened a resume the other day that was written by somebody else, and it was full of red. And to me, like, red is a negative color, you know, like when it shows things that maybe didn't go right. And this was an executive who had really good accomplishments, and the red was very jarring. So again, just kind of think about how the person that's going to be reading it views that resume. So, and so you can use color. I would just use it sparingly. You know, it doesn't need to be, so here's what I'm going to tell you about a resume formatting is it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be full of graphics and charts. It just needs to be clean, easy to read, and full of really good content that showcase how you can add value to a team. Okay, that's what your resume really needs to be. Okay, so let's see. I'm going through my list in my head. Your font. Oh, let's talk margins. So your margin size. So if you ever print your resume out and you're holding it in your hands, your thumb should not cover up words. In other words, you want your margins to never be smaller than 0.6 all the way around the document. And so you don't want like that teeny weeny font, that teeny weeny margin, okay? You want it to be printable within the printable margins. And that again is going back to the ATS and making sure it's readable by that ATS, that they can parse the information from your document and put it into their system. And then also font size. So you know, I don't recommend ever going below a 10-point font in the body of your resume because it's just not readable by the human eye. So if someone were to ever print it out, we want to make sure that everybody, you know, like me, who's older, and I always say it's not that my eyes are bad, it's that my arms aren't long enough because I have to hold things so far away from me to read them. So make sure that it's easily readable. So you know, if you take like say Calibri, I put it out there, and Calibri in 10-point font is really still very readable. But if I bump it up to 10.5, it's even better. And again, if I had it at 11 and I need to save a little space, I could just take everything and move it to 10.5. That's perfectly acceptable. Okay. So just make sure it's readable to the human eye if it's printed out. Okay. So I think those are all my formatting items that I wanted to talk to you about. And so now let's get back to the presentation. And let's talk about our education. Oops. Sorry, hit the wrong button. Come on. Okay, so your education, certifications, training. Now, I'm talking about them last. That doesn't necessarily mean that's where your education should go. Let me explain. So where your education lands is all about how important it is to your qualification for the role. So if I'm a new grad, my education is probably the most important thing about my qualifications. So it should maybe go higher. Or let's just say that you're making a pivot in your career and you want to use your education, you want to follow what education you've just completed or certifications you've just gained. Again, it can go higher. So on someone like that, it would be like your contact info, your summary, and then your education, and your work experience might go last. Okay, so that's the thing with the resume, is that it really depends on what is most marketable for you. And that is something that you got to think about. So I'll give you an example. I do a lot of work with people who are transitioning out of the military. And I had someone who was like a maintenance production manager, and they decided to go and become certified and trained as a medical assistant. So they were running maintenance for aircraft. They went to be a medical assistant. And so their education was important because not only did it give them the knowledge and the qualifications they needed to do that job, but that's where they could work in a lot of their keywords and medical terminology. So that person's education section took up as much space on their resume as their work experience section. So it became as important as their work experience. So writing a resume for a new grad, maybe someone that doesn't have industry experience yet because they've been in school, that person's resume would be their education, maybe some course highlights, maybe even some course project highlights to showcase their hands-on knowledge of the technical skills they gained while they were in school. So where your education lands on your resume is really a matter of how important it is to your qualifications to do the job, okay? So you see on this slide, it says that you can list degrees that are in progress or degrees that are partially completed. And so we're never gonna lie on our resume and say we have something that we don't have. But if we're trying to get through the scan, we're trying to get past that ATS, we're trying to get through the scan of the human looking at our resume, and maybe I have a degree that I'm working on, but I haven't quite finished it, I can put Bachelor of Science, Project Management. That's going to be bold. It's what's going to jump off the page. Right next to it, I'll put the university I'm going to. And then next to that, again, I'm never going to say I have it when I don't. I'm going to say in progress or due 2025. Or maybe I'm not currently enrolled because I don't have the ability to go to school. I need some funding. I might say courses toward degree, okay? Or currently pursuing degree. That's perfectly acceptable. We're not telling an untruth. We're saying our school is in progress. That is absolutely okay to do that. That gets you, again, through that scanning process, okay? But I want to talk to you about your education making you look overqualified or unfocused or even overeducated. And so you've got to think about, so I'll give you an example. I had someone who was an executive administrative assistant, loved her job. That's what she wanted to do her entire career. But also for fun, for just her own enrichment, she went out and got an MBA. And when we put the MBA on her resume, people kept saying, oh, I'm sorry, you're overqualified. And if you've ever had someone tell you you're overqualified, what that truly means is either A, I don't think I can afford you, or B, I don't think you're going to stick around in this job long term. you're going to leave me when something better comes along. Okay. And so if that's what you're hearing, you really need to think about how can you address those two issues. All right. And so we took her MBA off of her resume and she had a job within weeks. It went from you're overqualified to you're the perfect candidate. It's just that her education was making her look overeducated. Okay. I have a friend who's currently pursuing his PhD. He's got 6 master's degrees and 4 bachelor's degrees. He looks unfocused. And so for him, I say, hey, let's just showcase the most relevant education to your job target. These other degrees, because he was in the military, and so he's got some degrees that relate to more to what he did in the military. Those other degrees make him look overeducated and unfocused. Now, if you're like me and you just have 1 degree, but it's not really relevant to what you're doing, I'm still going to list that degree, even if it's irrelevant, because it does show that I have that education. Okay. But what I'm going to do is, because my education is as old as I am, and so I take the dates off of my education so that I'm not showcasing my age by telling you when I graduated from college. Okay. And so, Laura, the same thing goes for you. You've got college credits. They were more than 10 years ago. You don't have the degree, but you have courses toward that degree. So I would still list the degree that you were pursuing, the college that holds those credits, and I would say courses toward degree. And that's perfectly acceptable to do. Okay. But we're going to remove the dates because for me, it makes me look older. It makes my education look outdated, especially if I'm in a technical career field and I got my degree in IT 20 years ago. IT has changed a lot. So for me, if I'm in IT, I'm going to highlight my recent certifications and training. And so I would put your certifications in that area as well. For some of you, your certifications or licensure is critical to you showcasing that you are qualified for the job. As an example, my husband is an engineer and his resume has his name and then PE behind his name because his professional engineer licensure is critical for him to be able to even be qualified, minimally qualified for his job. So in his regard, it's really important, and it's so important we put it after his name. Okay. So if you know that your degree, your certification, your licensure is so important that you can't even be qualified without it, then find a way to get it even into your contact info. Okay. By putting it after your name. So when I say unfocused, let's just say that I'm a licensed massage therapist, I'm a certified dog trainer, and I'm a real estate agent, and I'm looking for a job in project management. I probably would drop all of those other certifications that aren't relevant to where I'm going. Now, let's say I'm looking for project management in the construction field. Then maybe my real estate licensure, my previous real estate licensure might be relevant, but probably those other things aren't. So you've got to really review your resume and ask yourself, not am I proud of this, but does this mean anything to the employer who I'm trying to attract? That's truly like the litmus test of whether something belongs on your resume. Okay. So in a previous career, I was the visual presentation and marketing manager for a retail company. This is where I gained my hiring manager experience, where I read resumes, I screened candidates, I interviewed people, I hired people. I unfortunately fired some people. That's where I have my HR experience from. But when I went from being in that career field, I went from that to teaching career development in high school. And so my job as a visual presentation and marketing manager, I did a lot of really cool things. I designed marketing campaigns. I laid out store layouts. I designed and built fixtures. But I also created reference materials and training programs, and I facilitated training out in the field. Well, all that irrelevant stuff got dropped off my resume, and I only focused on creating reference materials, writing curriculum, and facilitating training classes when I wrote my resume to go into my new career, because that's all they care about. Even though it was just a tiny part of my career, that's what my resume focused on. I dropped all that other irrelevant stuff off my resume because I knew that that's not what was important to them. Okay. So really think about, look at your resume with that eye of, am I truly appealing to the employer who I'm trying to attract? That's the important thing to really think about. And that's how you decide what goes on your resume and what order it goes in. Okay. So that is your education section. So again, most people here are going to put that at the bottom, but everybody's a little different. So let's see, I'm just looking to see if I missed any questions. Yeah, so high school education or GED doesn't belong on the resume. You don't need to even put that on there. So when I talk about education, I'm really talking about undergrad, graduate education, like bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, master's degrees, and so forth, and then certifications and training. And then also like, so free training in sales or other marketable skills. So there are like Coursera classes out there. There are LinkedIn learning classes out there. And again, if you're trying to kind of gain insight and knowledge into a new industry, these are some ways that you can take classes that are, some of them free, some of them very minimal costs. LinkedIn Learning, if you do like a 1 month premium LinkedIn membership trial, you can get access to LinkedIn Learning and just take all the classes you want to take. Those are things you can put on your LinkedIn profile, you can put on your resume, but you don't need to pay for LinkedIn. They'll always give you that 1 month free. Just put a little reminder in your calendar to cancel it before they start charging you. And those are some ways that you can access some free classes. Free tech classes. Maybe you need to polish up your tech skills, like Microsoft Word. I think I've got the website right. I think it's gcflearnfree.org. But those are some free technical training that's out there. Maybe you don't know how to use Microsoft Word or Excel as much as you'd like to. You want to brush up your technical skills. That would be a resource for that, for some free resources. Okay. So let's kind of finish up a couple of things here, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm going to put this screen up. It is, again, it's a quick survey. You can use the QR code on your phone to be able to fill this out. Oops, sorry about that. I'll put that back up. Or you can go to this link that you see on the screen. I know we often say, oh, it's a very quick survey. You know, this one says 2-minute survey. I promise you it only is going to take you like 30 seconds. And it is just another way for us to make sure that we are providing resources that you need to have success. As I said, this is a class brought to you by Arizona Outwork, Pinal County, and Career Connectors, and we want to make sure that these free resources are meeting your needs. Okay, so I'll leave that up for another minute. So let's see. Bree, do you have the ability to drop the link in the chat for me? Just so we have that survey link in there. If you're still listening, and I'll try to do it too. So if you I don't have the ability to follow. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Bree. You're the best. Thanks to Bree and Wendy, who are working behind the scenes, keeping the chat clean and managing people coming in and out. I appreciate you guys for being there for me. And so if you would take a minute to fill out that survey and give us any input, and just make sure that you're going to get the resources and the follow-up that we have for you. So let's talk a little bit about the two people that have brought you the class today. First of all, Arizona Outwork Pinal County is the main sponsor of this program. Arizona Outwork Pinal County offers lots of different resources for you. So I think some of you were Pinal County, some of you were Maricopa County. But you will see that these services are available at all of the Arizona Outwork centers, but at Pinal County, this is a way for you to get in touch with them. Here's their phone number. You can scan the QR code, which will take you to their website. And they have all sorts of different services for job seekers there. So please feel free to check them out and follow up with them. Again, this is also brought to you by Career Connectors. Career Connectors has a lot of different workshops every month. And I mentioned salary negotiation hosted by my friend Brenda Mariah. Jessica Pierce, the founder of Career Connectors, leads a job search strategy course. And so if you go to this website, this link here, they'll tell you all the other courses that are offered through Arizona Outwork, Pinal County, and Career Connectors. And I just see we have Jose in the chat who is here with Arizona Outwork, Pinal County. So if you have any questions for Jose, I bet he would be able to answer them for you. And so please check out those other courses. Career Connectors is a nonprofit organization that was really built and established by Jessica Pierce to support job seekers. And so, you know, it was one of those things that was brought in kind of as a need. Jessica herself lost her job and said, you know, if I'm struggling, there must be other people struggling like me. And so she launched this nonprofit organization, and they provide a lot of great benefits, resources, and information. Here's where you can find out about Career Connectors. They host monthly networking events, and they invite employers in, and those employers that are coming in with jobs looking to hire people, you can interact and engage directly with those employers, those recruiters from those employers. But they always also have a keynote speaker that has great information, and there are breakout rooms at every one of these events where you can go in and get LinkedIn support, financial support in terms of like budgeting and budget management. There is a resume writer at every single one of those events that will give you review and input on your resume. So definitely check out their schedule and see, and they do host career fairs throughout the year as well in conjunction with, oh my gosh, Best Companies AZ is the organization they often host with, okay? That is it for me today. And so I'm gonna stop my share. And I would like to invite anyone to, if you have a question, raise your hand for me. And let's take a look at if there's any questions I can answer for you. And you can unmute, ask your question when I call on you. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. And Jose is in the chat as well. So if you have any questions for Jose, please feel free to raise your hand, unmute, ask your question. I am here for another 30 minutes if you have questions for me. So I would love to be able to address those for you. If you don't know how to raise your hand, by the way, so in your reactions down at the bottom of the screen, and that gives you that opportunity to do that. So, okay, I don't know how to say that name, but I see your hand up. So if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Okay, it's Isata. Thanks,
I
Lovely.
was not going to try
that. Your teaching has been very informative. I just wanted to ask, I had asked it in the chat, but I think you missed it. On your resume, can you include your core competencies, such as, you know, being detail-oriented, reliable? Where does that go on your resume?
Is that right? Is that right?
It's Isata.
I'm sorry. You even told me how to say it, and I still forgot. Okay. I still messed it up.
That's okay. That's okay.
I know I'm not the first, but still, I like to get it right. So that's a great question. So you can include core competencies on your resume, and that's typically a section that maybe falls underneath your summary that's just got a keyword area. And that's a place where you can load up your resume with those keywords, those core competencies, like you said, detail-oriented, so on and so forth. I don't use them very often when I write a resume because I prefer to use them throughout the document and prove them, right? And so instead of saying I'm detail-oriented, I might say, used meticulous attention to detail to maintain 100% accurate documentation, something like that. So I would rather integrate those keywords throughout my document and prove them with accomplishments. However, there are some areas where you have to have a core competency section. So somebody that has, say, a very technical background and has to have like specific technical skills, like in IT as an example. I think that you might need a technical summary, and that's something that you might have to have. So it's not necessary. And I try to instead use the keywords throughout the document, but it is absolutely okay to do it. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. What other questions can I answer for you? All right, Lydia. Oh, I see your comment. So let's see if we can't help you. You want to come out? You want to unmute and come talk to me about what you've been doing and see if I can help you?
Yeah, hi. Okay,
Hi.
so I have been out of the workforce for quite a while because I was a full-time caregiver. So one of the things is all of my real jobs that I had were more than 15 years ago. So I guess basically how, from your advice, I think how I would handle that would be just put it in other work experience, because the jobs I've had the last few years are not what I want to do. But it was just part-time temporary jobs, and terrible jobs.
Jobs you don't want again. Got it.
Never.
And so you're returning to the workforce after an absence, a time off to be a caregiver. During that time, were you doing any volunteer work? Or
Yes.
so could you highlight some of your volunteer work during that time? And I know oftentimes you're like, well, I wasn't getting paid, but that doesn't mean that you weren't making an impact, right? So even volunteer work could get highlighted. So I would put on my resume, the very first line I would put is full-time caregiver and the dates. And I would put a line that said providing full-time care for a family member. And then I would write ready to return to work full-time. Okay. Like let them know, like, I'm no longer necessary as a caregiver. I'm ready to return to work. And then for you, I would probably then list your volunteer experience and your accomplishments in your volunteer experience. And then I would break my rule and I would put your work experience in there, even though it's older. And I would go back like maybe at least probably, like you said, 20 years in your experience to showcase what you did before you took time off to be a caregiver. Again, there are the rules. I don't call them rules for resumes because there aren't really any rules. They're best practices of how to most effectively showcase your background. And in your background, your work experience was a while ago, but it doesn't mean it's not valuable. It's just you've been doing something different, right?
Okay, and so do I just leave off the part-time junkie jobs that I've worked the last few years? I mean, they were jobs, so I did do stuff. I want to show that I was busy and I did something. I just don't, when people look at those jobs, those are in food service and stuff, and I'm getting too old for that. I'm very introverted. I don't want to stand up all day and deal with people and cook food and clean up after them all day.
Yeah. And so I guess that's my first question to you is, what do you want to do next? What is your focus? What is your target? And how I answer that question would really be dependent upon what your target is. So if you say, I would like to do like administrative role where I'm sitting at a desk, answering a phone, greeting customers as they walk in the door, but like you said, not standing up cooking food or whatever the case may be, not on your feet doing retail. So what are some of the, like, once you figure out what you want to do, like, what are some of the things that we can carry through, even as you call your junkie jobs and your caregiving experience, that make you qualified for where you want to go next. And so maybe like what ties all of that together is your customer service, is your maybe, you know, again, it's all depends on where you want to go next and how you like that is really the defining factor of what goes on your resume, is what's next for you. What do you want to be next?
Well, that's the other problem is because, okay, what I want to do is use my degree that I got a long time ago. And I need to find, this is a whole other problem. I need to find something like a mentor, basically, that would help me brush up on my skills to get back to that point of where I was when I finished university several years ago. And in the meantime, I just need a job, a part-time job, something in an office that is quiet. I can't stand retail. I don't want to do food service. I'm really introverted and I get sensory overload. So I need something in a quiet office where there is a limited amount of interaction with people. And yeah, I can do computers and I can answer phones but I know that that's not what I want to do the rest of my life. I don't want to be taking care of somebody else's calendar and travel plans and making sure their lobby is clean because I have a degree and I want to use it one day. So that's a whole other
What's your degree?
in interior design.
Okay.
I
And
want
so-
to make sure people are safe, that they're in their environments and it's safe and all the codes are, because that's another thing. People think, oh, interior design, she wants to go make things pretty. That's the last thing you do. You
Yeah.
make sure it's safe and usable and functional first.
So, you know, one of the things that I love about LinkedIn is it opens up opportunities to connect with and build relationships with people that we typically would have no way of getting in touch with, right? So I say I do a lot of work with military transition people, and I've had conversations with generals, like very famous generals, like on there that I have had conversations with that there's no way I would ever interact with them in any other way. It's like General Petraeus has like connected with me, and we've had conversations about things that I do and that ideas that he has for me. And so LinkedIn gives you that opportunity. And so you can actually go out and do a filtered search on LinkedIn, looking for mentorships, looking for people that maybe are even close to you that, you know, you could go in and just ask if you could volunteer there. And again, I know you need a job that pays you money, but you could start off by volunteering somewhere for, you know, 4 hours a week, 8 hours a week, and then you go work the rest of the time. And it's just building that relationship, and so that LinkedIn gives you that opportunity to do that and actually converse with people and build the relationship first with them. And or maybe there's somebody that you really admire and that you can have a conversation with, like you've seen their work somewhere. You can express kind of like, you know, your approach to interior design and just build those relationships. And LinkedIn is a great place to be able to do that. So that could be a good starting point for you.
Okay, yes, I'm trying to build connections now. Yes.
Yeah, I know. It's really become, networking has become so important in the job market. Just because employers get overwhelmed with how many applications they get. And they're often turning to places like LinkedIn to identify candidates in a way. So there's somebody who's put in a apprenticeship, azapprenticeship.com link that you can also check out in terms of, you know, some of it might be paid, some of it might be free, but again, it's just about building that experience, kind of rebuilding that muscle, if you will, of getting, like you said, brushing up those skills. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Happy to help. So anybody else have any questions? Are there any other questions I missed? I was trying to keep up with the chat, but it was going fast every once in a while. So let me know if there's anything else I can answer for you. And like I said, I'm here. I think Jose is here from Arizona at Work, Pinal County, if you have any questions about what they offer. And yeah, so there's another good resource from Sharon for Lydia, is a women's organization. So I like that. Anytime that I can connect people with a mentor. I think everyone should have more than one mentor in their life of, people that are often willing to like pour into you and give you those resources. So. All right, Bree, I think we can shut down the recording. I don't know that we have any more questions, but I'll stick around for a few more minutes. Like I said, you have me for another